You know, this is about the third time I've tried to do this video. It's very difficult to do. This channel has been under attack since day one. I'm the only channel I think that sees viewership numbers go down. YouTube allows copyright strikes against the music that I use. I'm using Sound Ideas. They have a whole bunch of music and sound effects, and it's a royalty-free. Buy a license to use it, and you can use it any way you want with a couple of realistic exceptions. They're good people. I enjoy working with them. Have for years. And YouTube is allowing copyright strikes against the music. I even had a copyright strike against the national anthem, military recording, by a military band, downloaded from a military site. So I've gone through and with my computers recreated the national anthem. And all it's there is to remind all of us to be loyal to our country. That doesn't mean we agree, but we are loyal to our country. Wherever you live, it's to remind you that. But someone's claimed copyright. So I recreated the whole thing electronically. In the last few beats, I put what sounds like cannon fire in as if it was a live performance. Sometimes they do that with music. So this is what I'm asking you to do, if you would please. Leave a comment. Say hello if you want to. That's enough. Or if you have a real comment, I'll answer it. Do a thumbs up. And share with others. If you think I have something of value for someone else on a particular video, pass it on to them. So I could have used a little bit of help on your side. Don't get nasty with YouTube. Just help by proving that you're watching the video. That it's kind of hard for YouTube to say, I don't have viewership. Prime example. Just a bit ago, I did a walkthrough of a new Harbor Freight store. Within 24 hours, I had 1,500 views. For some reason, they didn't shadow ban that one. But if you go back and look at some of the other ones that I've done, you know, they're not all A material. But there's a lot of good stuff in there. And you can see what kind of viewership that I get. Because I'm shadowed banned. And I sit there with my computer and watch the numbers go down. I don't think that's fair. So what I'm doing is I'm asking you to help. Just leave a comment, thumbs up, and share the video with someone else if you think there's value. Now, if you don't think there's value, don't do it. But at least say hello. Or if you have a real comment, I'll answer it. Well, let's get on to the video now, okay? If things that are happening in the world that is making you nervous with the wars and threats of war, that's understandable. The more that we can take control should help us feel better. So why am I talking about an emergency antenna? Well, if you're on a subscription service, it can go down, and then we're left in the dark. Are we in an emergency situation, or is it a technical problem? Personally, we have a weather radio, and several of our radios can receive short-wave signals. But even if you want to build an antenna to get off a subscription, it's a good idea to know how to build an antenna that is more than a wire coat hanger. This deserves a good talk about. Hello anyone, I'm Scott Bame. They call me the old farmer. Communication during an emergency is vital. An old radio engineer could take an old DeSoto automobile and a Kenmore dishwasher and build an emergency transmitter for sending out Morse code. Actually, that's not true, but you'd be surprised what could be cobbled together to create a transmitter. All that you would need is to turn on and off the transmitter for creating an emergency signal using Morse code. What you're listening to is an SOS signal that is being transmitted only by turning on and off the transmitter. This was the original way that Morse code was sent. It was simply turning on and off the transmitter to create dots and dashes. It takes much less power to transmit using this method than it is to send a tone to create Morse code, as we are hearing now. In this method, the transmitter stays on, and an audio tone is used to relay the SOS message. This still takes much less power than sending voice.
The frequency response for a voice message may be a bandwidth of 2,000 cycles, which sounds like an old carbon microphone on a telephone. A signal that doesn't need to send voice can be sent using only a few cycles of bandwidth, which is much too small to transmit voice.
The reason why AM radio sounds so bad is that the FCC has been reducing the bandwidth that radio stations can use to send their signal. This opens up the ability to put more stations on the air. It used to be before FM that the AM signal sounded almost as good as an FM signal, but with static and other stations bleeding through, especially at night. I remember back in my youth, I could build a crystal radio set out of bits and pieces. Science magazines and boys magazines would every once in a while show how to build a crystal set. The signal was not loud and you had to use crystal headsets, which sounded like the astronauts when they were on the moon. But you could hear many faraway stations. The more antenna you have, the better the reception for any receiver. Most FM receivers have only a little coil stuck on the back of the receiver to pull in the stations. You could use an outdoor antenna such as your TV antenna to bring in signals from farther away. If you look at the price of antennas, they can become quite expensive to buy. This is what I use for a TV antenna. It's a 900 megacycle antenna that's close enough to UHF TV frequencies that it works well. For VHF TV and FM radio, it's not as good, but it's good enough. So maybe you want to build an antenna. It's easy and it's not critical for receiving signals, whereas sending out signals is very important to follow the rules for antennas. Antennas are usually built to be at a half wavelength, quarter wavelength, 1/8 wavelength, and so on. This is for receiving the signal. It is usually the center frequency of the band that the antenna is tuned for when receiving broadcasting signals. I would tune the FM antenna to 97.9 megacycles, or in today's jargon, megahertz. No, not the car company. So let's see what a simple FM antenna for this frequency will look like. Actually, you don't even need to add the balun to reduce any other signals, and you end up with an FM antenna. Take a couple pieces of twin lead antenna wire, one 38 inches long, and the other piece will be used for the antenna wire to the radio. Strip both ends off so that you can have 4 exposed wires. Twist the ends together. Now in the center of only one of the wires, not both, make a cut and strip. In other words, we're kind of making a loop, only flattened. There should be 2 wires now exposed on either side of the cut. Strip both ends off of the antenna and tie it to the antenna lead that's going to the radio. Twist 2 of the wires together per side so that everything looks like the letter T. Or if you want, you can do a halo and just do a big circle and have only one cut and then do the antenna leads on it. Because the T is just a squashed loop. If you want, you can solder or use wire nuts to keep the connections together. You now have an FM antenna. An antenna is usually a dipoled antenna that's stacked to add more reception ability. A very loose rule of thumb is a dipole has a 2 dB antenna gain if everything goes correctly. Consider that doubling the gain is at 3 dB. So 10 dipoles tied together, or 10 of these hoops tied together, will get you a 20 dB gain, or you will receive roughly about 6 times better or stronger than the single dipole. There are many designs for antennas, but we want to put one together in a jiffy so that we can listen for important information. The more elements, the more directional the antenna will be. The best antenna will be a full-wave antenna. The problem will be the size of the antenna, so we will go with a quarter-wave antenna. Double the length of the elements if you wish to have a half-wave antenna, and multiply the length of the element by 4 if you wish a full-length antenna. Now let me show you on a commercial antenna what it looks like. I've got this antenna leaning against the screen door just to kind of show you what a typical TV antenna would look like. And I think most of you would know what it is, but usually from a distance, or not looking closely at it. Now, in this video, we're going to show you how to make some antennas, and they can be for TV or for radio. And about the only difference with the antennas is how many elements you have on it, and the length of the elements. The big point is the balun that goes onto the antenna that fine-tunes it. So if you ever have an antenna stop working, it's probably the balun got blown. And they're only a couple of dollars to replace. So you replace it, your antenna is going to work, unless there's nothing left of your antenna or it's shorted out. So I'm going to go in close. Most people know what the 2-element T-shaped type of antenna looks like. Usually you find them on the back of radio receivers for FM. And so basically what you have is just 2 of these elements. The wire's hooked onto one side, and the other wire's hooked onto the other side, and then that runs to the antenna terminals on your radio receiver. And that would be true for AM too. AM is extremely longer antennas, and that's why quite often you see coils used in it. But basically, just think of it this way. See if I can, there we go. FM antenna has an element out one side, and find my finger again, there we go, and out the other side, and then your antenna wire goes down and hooks to your receiver. Well, with these bigger antennas, let's get back over here, trying to do 3 things at once here in different perspectives. I'm seeing things differently in the camera screen than what I'm seeing in person, so it's kind of hard to figure out where things are. These are antenna elements, and they're just parallel together. And then they all join up down here in this box. Right down here, see if I can. And then you put your balun on here, and then your antenna line. Bigger. Now this is the old-fashioned before digital television. So these smaller ones are for UHF, and the longer ones are for VHF, 2 through 10, 14 through, it used to be 83, now it's what, 36? So the smaller ones here are for UHF right here, and these bigger ones are for VHF. Now you can add on reflectors. This is a reflector. Let's see if I can bring it. Here we go. This is a reflector right along here, and it kind of aims the signal to the elements. These are reflectors too. One is broken off on this side, and there's nothing wrong with using this antenna. Here's a complete reflector. So if they're tied together like this, it's an antenna element. If it's something like this, where it's just bolted to the frame, it's a reflector. And 19 inches to an element for FM on each element, on either side, back and forth. And you don't have to put a balun on it, but you'll eliminate a lot of interference by putting a balun on. You could just hook this directly up to a TV without a balun, and it would work. There's no problem. The balun is a transformer that kind of fine-tunes the antenna to the frequencies that you want. Because, for example, I say 19-inch element for an FM radio. Well, you know, if it's 25 inches, if it's 3 feet, no big deal. Same thing if it's shorter. It just means you don't get as much reception. So those are some of the things to point out on a big antenna. So let's take a look at some of the other stuff. I'll go back inside and sit down, and we can be talking about some of the things that to consider with building antenna. And this is great to do with kids, let me tell you. It's a fun project. You could take a sheet of plywood, lay it down, and just use wire and staple it to the plywood. It doesn't have to be fancy at all. Just as long as you kind of keep the size of the elements in perspective to the frequencies that you want to get. Now, for an FM frequency, I would set it at 90, cut them for 97.9, the frequency 97.9. That's midway of the FM band. And there's enough slot that it will easily pick up the high end of the FM band and the low end of the FM band. So usually when you build an antenna, you build it for the middle frequency, and just understand that it's able to pick up fine the whole band. So let's go back inside and talk a little bit more about antennas. Each side of the dipole will be about 1.5 feet for a quarter wave antenna. That means both sides will have a stranded wire of 2.5 feet long. Or if you want to, you can do that hoop antenna and have it take the wire that's 2.5 feet long and then tie your antenna leads to it. Parallel the wires for a multiple element dipole. If you really want to fine-tune your antenna, the better balance will be made with a metal covering that will have the ability to attach a ground wire to reduce the chance of lightning getting into your receiver. It is best to unhook the antenna during a storm and connect both leads to a ground. Now understand, this is a dirty way of making an antenna to be able to listen to critical information. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just the stability and the length that the antenna will last before it starts to deteriorate is the only difference that we're talking about. If you're using stiff enough wire, you won't need the plywood to keep everything in shape. Try playing around with this in good weather, and then search the internet for the 100 or so different antennas that can be made as a DIY project. Also, it's a fun thing to do with kids, so give it a try. Thank you for watching, and please be safe. We'd sure appreciate it if you could subscribe and leave a comment. You know how YouTube behaves. They won't believe you watched a video unless you leave a comment. Also, it would help if you ring the bell and do a thumbs up. As you know, if I find a good channel, I pass it on to you. So if you think it's appropriate, it would sure help if you passed us on to your closest 10,000 friends and family. But above all, give a helping hand to someone today. It's the best gift to give. It'll make you feel good too.
Don't forget to click like, subscribe, share, or ring the bell buttons on the Original Old Farmer channel. We enjoy reading the comments that you leave, and they do help the channel, so keep them coming. And once again, thank you for watching The Original Old Farmer.
The VFW National Home for Children, providing families of veterans and active duty military opportunities for growth and development in a nurturing community. Please consider a donation to help their children and families. I.C. Rhodes speaking.